Thank you, Pierre. I'll just go ahead and share my, I think you need to enable me to share screen. Shall I try again?
Now it works.
Yes. Okay, so welcome everyone. The paper that I'm going to be presenting today is a work in progress. It's a paper where I and a PhD student at IIT Kanpur, Brian Gomes, who's also now working at the Salesian College, we tried to look at how the elderly engage with digital money as part of large networks. Through which their care is organized. I suppose that the inspiration for this paper also comes from the first research project that I started with, when I was looking at digital money, where I found that behind what appears to be this one transaction, there are many agents involved in making that transaction possible. And so it is with that motivation that I am carrying this work forward as well. I think what we can start with is to unpack what digital payments or digital money means in different contexts. So we saw the way in which, for instance, what counts as digital money in Switzerland, in Professor Mutzel's talk. When it comes to India, I have put up this definition in front of you. It's a definition that is used by Niti Aayog, which is a very influential policy think tank, which is very active in government circles in India. And you'll see that the definition of a digital payment in India is very broad-based. So essentially, you're trying to catch almost everything apart from cash in this definition. That's something that we should definitely keep in mind. So for instance, it means that even if you make an electronic bank transfer, you use a debit card or you use wallets, all of these are included in the category of digital payments. Okay. I also want to tell you a little bit about the field site that we're drawing on for this paper. Our paper is actually based on a broader ethnography that has been carried out since 2018 by Brian amongst elderly Anglo-Indians in the eastern city of Kolkata. Apart from that, what both Brian and I started to focus on since 2020 is to try and understand how these elderly respondents were engaging with, or whether they were engaging with platforms, and later on with different types of money. So we've been doing consecutive interviews with them and interacting with them as well. So as part of this endeavor, we reached out to about 21 households. There are multiple people in each household that we spoke to. Apart from that, we also spoke to people outside of the households. As far as the socioeconomic profile is concerned, this is an interesting one because what we have found, I'm sure that we will get to hear this from other field sites as well, is that over the pandemic, the number of people who have been using digital money certainly has expanded. So for instance, maybe in 2020 when we started off, we would have the middle class or upper middle class respondents. But today we also have a few respondents who are from the low middle class, who are through their extended networks able to engage with digital money. Sorry. So as I have mentioned, when we talk about how care is organized for the elderly, one of the things that we are keeping in mind is that this is often a network phenomena. So for instance, the idea of a care network is a very significant one. As part of the development of this concept of a care network, in 2017, Tanya Allen also proposed the idea of a care collective. Now, a care collective refers to a socio-technical network through which care is provided to people. She was looking at people who had elderly parents in Kerala, but were themselves located abroad. So how is it that they managed to provide for care for their elderly parents. In this paper, Arlen's focus was primarily on communicative technologies. I think the very useful aspect of looking at a care network is that it compels us to think beyond dyadic relations, which means that if we're looking at the care arrangements for a particular elderly person, rather than looking at the elderly person and their link to person A, and then separately looking at the elderly person and their link to person B, instead it compels us to ask, well, what kind of interactions exist among the nodes of this network? Apart from that, a network perspective also compels us to recognize that the elderly themselves can be quite active in the management of their own care. For instance, in yesterday's session, we heard this quite often, that the elderly don't want to become a burden for others. So that was a strong sense that we also see in our field site. And of course, that the elderly themselves can provide care for others. So in this context, taking Arlen's work forward, last year, Brian and I also wrote a paper in which we mentioned that perhaps going forward from communicative technologies, we can also start looking at digital platforms as an important part of this socio-technical network care, particularly in the context of what is happening after the pandemic in India. We also, along with Pierre last year, published a paper on where we were looking at the figure of the collaborative user. We really started off with the question, do elderly users even engage with or think about platforms? And we were pleasantly surprised to find that actually they did. But rather than the individual user that we were looking at, we found that they worked with other people to engage with digital platforms. So we found a variety of user arrangements. For instance, the elderly may ask someone else to use the platform on their behalf. We found that they would sometimes share devices with someone else, sometimes to the extent that they would even share accounts with someone else. So this is something that this paper particularly was a collaboration, was a comparative study between India and Italy. So it is in this vein, just carrying this work forward, that we are now trying to look at how the elderly engage with digital payments in India, particularly as it relates to platforms. One of the concepts that I found quite helpful to think about this phenomena is the concept of money work, which was first developed by the sociologist Sandra Kolovecchia in 2008. Now, Kolovecchia defines money work as the labor of managing family finances. She, interestingly, she developed this in the context of care, particularly caregiving, and the family. From there, the concept then travels to the HCI literature, money work, where, as you can see, I've listed a couple of definitions here. The focus became on interaction work, right? So the great advantage of, I think, or the contribution of the HCI literature was to really show us that, look, money work can involve a lot more people than just family. It can involve a lot of other people as well, a variety of people. And here, as you will see, the focus is on accessibility. So if I were to really paraphrase how money work is used in the HCI literature, the idea is to find out what kind of work, interactional work, goes into a person being able to access digital money or access the savings or finances through digital money. Okay. However, going forward and looking at money work in care collectives, our suggestion through the concept of collaborative money work is to revive that sociological definition a little bit. In other words, to go beyond the question of access alone. So for instance, today, I want to show you how the elderly actually engage with digital money on platforms in quite strategic ways, and we have to take into account the context in which this use also occurs. So if I were to give you a very basic example, I'll start with one of our respondents, Pearl, who lives in a flat in the eastern city of Kolkata, along with a husband and a daughter who's a school teacher. Now, Pearl is someone who is quite savvy with the use of platforms, also with digital money, but she prefers to have her daughter around because I think it gives her confidence. So she told us about how she wanted to use an online retail platform called Flipkart. It's quite popular in India. And she has very specific ideas of, for this retail platform, I will use this wallet. For the other retail platform, for instance, something like Big Basket, which is for food, you get groceries through that platform. She is specific that she wants to use a different mode of digital payment. So for the use of Flipkart, for instance, she wanted to use a wallet called Paytm in India, and she was experiencing some problems with it because she had tried to load it onto her phone, and she had experienced problems in the past. So as a recourse to that, instead, what she does now is she waits for her daughter to come back from school. She will use her daughter's phone, which has both the Flipkart app as well as the Paytm app. She's competent enough that she will go ahead and add things onto the cart in Flipkart, and then using login details, her daughter's login details for the payment app, she will go ahead and make the payment. So this is, I wanted to give you this example also to show the kind of shared use of devices that we saw amongst people in the Care Collective. From here, what I want to show you also is that often these care collectives can involve other people and not just family. So for instance, this is a very small transaction that we are looking at by a set of two elderly women we first encountered in Kolkata. This is 66-year-old Annie, who used to live with her 85-year-old mother-in-law, Rosalie. Now, Annie's daughter, Cassie, moved to the southern city of Bangalore a few years back. So when we first started talking to Annie, she was very hesitant to use platforms in general. So often she would reach out to her then neighbor, Polomi, who was staying in the same neighborhood as her in Kolkata, to be able to use basic platforms. Over time, what happened was that, particularly towards the end of 2020, Annie and Rosalie relocated to Bangalore to live with Cassie. Now, what we see is that over time, Annie has learned how to use this food delivery app on her phone, which is called Swiggy in India. Interestingly, Annie has two phones. She has a smartphone, but she still retains her feature phone. So now Annie knows enough to be able to open the Swiggy app, load things onto her cart in Swiggy. But when it comes to payment, she often feels that she needs the help of someone else. So when Cassie is at home, she will often reach out to Cassie. Or interestingly, when Cassie is in office, Annie feels hesitant to disturb Cassie at work. So what she does is she reaches out to Polomi, who's living in the other city in Kolkata. And so on the Swiggy app on her smartphone, she has that in one hand, and through the feature phone, she asks Polomi for details of Polomi's debit card. So Polomi will give her details like, this is my debit card number, this is the CVV. Interestingly, in India, there is a mechanism that is used to ensure safety and to verify that you are indeed the appropriate user, which is called the OTP system, one-time password. So that is often sent as a text to the person who is engaging in this transaction. And Polomi and Annie have found this way to circumvent even that system. And so Polomi will just read out, oh, I've got this text message here. This is the OTP. You can feed it in. Now, as you can see, apologies, this is not a very pretty chart, but we wanted to show just how much money work goes into one transaction. Annie will then go ahead and show Cassie the bill on her smartphone and said, this is how much I owe Polomi. Cassie asked to see this because Annie often forgets what is the amount that she owes because of her memory. And then once Cassie has this, when she gets back from work, she repays Polomi through another digital wallet called Google Pay. So I have a different chart, and again, we can discuss this more in the Q&A session. But this just to point out that, for instance, the previous example, we saw a neighbor who was helping out, a neighbor in a different city who was helping out. Here we see that the care collective involves a shopkeeper from the same community. So someone who's an Anglo-Indian who owns a very popular Anglo-Indian shop in the neighborhood. They are the people that the elderly person is reaching out to in order to engage in this kind of transaction. And here the case is of an Uber transaction. So as I said, one of the things that we wanted to look at was how is it that the elderly strategically use digital money to manage socialties? And another question that has been, that I've been thinking about a little bit is how do we really match this aspect of design and code with what people end up doing with it? So for instance, we found that as we know, the gamification of money, which is something that Sophie really pointed out in great detail, right? So for instance, the rewards or loyalty programs, what have you, we found that in our field site, people, the elderly really responded to this kind of gamification, but they used it also to maintain their social links with others, such as family members or neighbors. So for instance, going back to Pearl, she very strategically uses platforms and platform appropriate payment mechanisms, and she always keeps an eye out for deals in various platforms. It's fascinating what she does. So for instance, let's say she finds a deal on Big Basket, which is the grocery app. When she finds that there's a good deal, she will send a message on her building WhatsApp group to all her neighbors and say, there's a great deal on these spices. Would someone like to go halvesies with me? And they can respond, and she will go ahead with the transaction. And of course, she manages this as well, because now with this purchase, she's also having to deal with a set of other people who are involved in the transaction, which are her neighbors. So for instance, when this kind of a purchase involves neighbors, she ensures that she uses the payment on delivery option, because she feels that since the purchase is being made for a neighbor, I cannot afford to buy a faulty product, because then who will get into the conversation between the neighbor and myself and the platform? So therefore, she ensures that the product is first delivered to her and then pays either through cash or credit or debit card. We also found, interestingly, that some interesting examples of the kind of gamification in digital wallets and how the elderly were reacting to that. So for instance, we came across a mother and daughter, and the daughter had recently started using a digital wallet. And so, as part of that digital wallet, you will find the rewards. So there's a scratch card that you can actually scratch on your smartphone. So she used to often, like any time she did that, she would involve her mother, because the mother really enjoyed this aspect of having a lottery kind of thing coming up. Apart from that, we also saw, for instance, one of our elderly respondents often use this gamification in order to enhance his relations with his neighbors. For instance, he would tell people, okay, you need this thing from the platform. I'll go ahead and make the payment, because I will get some points for it if I make that purchase on your behalf. So we see that the elderly really have some of these aspects, and they're cognizant of it as they go along. I think I will stop here right now in the interest of time, but I'd be happy to, of course, take any questions that you have for the presentation at the end. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Right.
Thank you, Jillet, for the presentation.
So I think next up we have a presentation by Dr. Sunniva Sandbukt from the University of Copenhagen, and she gets us a very, very interesting case study from Indonesia. Sunniva, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Let me just try and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my opening slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay, Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel. I look forward to the discussion afterwards. So I'm a postdoc at the Center for Digital Welfare, and I'm a member there of the Technologies and Practice Research Group at the IT University of Copenhagen, actually, which is much smaller and less well known than the University of Copenhagen. And so this presentation is based on my research for my PhD, and it's about how the dynamics of Indonesian ride-hailing apps affect the circulation of money through these integrated payment platforms. And this is going to be a very condensed version of the arguments. And before I start, I just want to give a shout out to the artist Nadia Rizki, who has made the illustrations that you'll be seeing. So let me begin by describing one of my earliest encounters from my fieldwork in 2018. I had just downloaded the Gojek app and I had topped up my GoPay wallet. And I was trying to use this money to pay for a cappuccino in a neighborhood coffee shop. And so, belum bisa, the barista told me when I asked if I could pay for my order with GoPay. You can't yet. And I had selected this coffee shop from my neighborhood because I had seen it listed in the GoFood section of the Gojek app. And so I had assumed that the digital wallet would be an acceptable form of payment. The coffee shop only accepted cash, the barista explained, but if I wanted to use GoPay, there was a way of doing so. Namely, I could make an order for my coffee using the GoFood tab in the Gojek app and select digital payment option rather than cash payment upon checkout. Then a Gojek driver would receive my order, drive to the cafe, place the order, wait for it to be prepared, and then pay for it using their own cash. The driver would then bring me the coffee and be paid for both the cost of the coffee and their time using my GoPay balance. And this was my first encounter with the entanglements of online drivers and digital money in Indonesia, and my first confounding experience of the kind of peculiar limitations and opportunities of transaction that had materialized from this app's infrastructure and interface. So for those familiar with the more seamless digital transactions of similar ride-hailing and food delivery apps such as Uber or Deliveroo or Bolt here in Denmark, this moment of exchange between drivers and passengers may seem really peculiar or cumbersome. And it comes in large part out of the fact that many people in Indonesia don't have bank accounts or use credit cards, which is the form of payment commonly associated with these types of apps. In practice, what I had experienced was how the Indonesian ride-hailing platforms were utilizing their fleets of these on-demand drivers to operate as mobile extensions of the digital payment infrastructure. So customers can use drivers as exchange agents, paying in cash for a top-up of their digital credit balance, but drivers also act as the cash bridge for customers wishing to make digital purchases, paying out of pocket with their own cash money at places only accepting cash payments, only to later be repaid by the customer. So at the core of my fieldwork were two of the most prominent Indonesian payment apps at the time, GoPay and OVO. Both gained traction as the integrated payment mechanism of their respective ride-hailing platforms, Gojek and Grab. And through fleets of what the ride-hailing company vernacular likes to refer to as driver partners, they have been able to convert customers of their transport service into customers of their financial service. Thus, in the Indonesian context, the emergence and increasing dominance of digital payments is intimately entangled with the use of ride-hailing apps and the labor of drivers. So driver partners, notably, are not employed by these apps, but they are algorithmically mobilized in service of the app's customers, and by extension, the digital economy through the platform infrastructure. So loosely organized drivers, known simply as Ojek, have existed long before Gojek or Grab. And so what these companies have done is impose themselves over an existing social infrastructure and provided customers with an easily interpretable interface for engagement. And in doing so, these platforms create momentary stabilizing parameters for exchange, thus controlling the conditions of transaction that were already taking place without them. Thus, these apps position themselves as the access point to their customers, which is a critical resource for drivers whose labor they now control and thus extract value from. And it was not uncommon for drivers during my fieldwork to express discontent with the conditions of this alleged partnership. They were partners with the app company, relying on each other for income, but they were not equal parties. And so, for instance, when drivers sign up, they accept the terms and conditions that come with working as a driver partner. However, as they point out, those conditions frequently change without warning or consultation. Thus, many experience that the apps configure them as on-demand robots, or that this labor that they offer is mobilized and channeled through the app infrastructure to serve the needs of customers and ultimately the financial interest of the companies. And we see this nice configuration in this illustration from the app. But so how do the apps configure customers? Well, during a 2019 fireside chat at an industry event in Bali, Gojek's founder, Nadia Makarim, makes an interesting observation about the app that he helped create, calling Gojek the operating system of the real world. And he elaborates, you're creating a cyborg in our consumers that are able to not have to do the things that they don't want to do, and therefore have more time to get stuff done in life. Implicit here, of course, is the logic of automation, which reduces the time spent on a process. And through this automation, the app, the phone, and the driver who is tasked with doing those things for you all become a part of your extended cyborg self. It's interesting that the emphasis here is on how the app can serve those similar to Makarim. His emphasis on productivity, efficiency, on not having to waste your own time when someone can waste theirs for you, feels remarkably revealing of his worldview and his orientation as one of the app's consumer cyborgs. Characterizing what problem he feels Gojek is trying to solve in the world, Makarim says, it was simply a problem of mobility, right? How do you get a human, an object like food or money or value to move in the fastest possible, cheapest, most convenient way using one tool? His answer is the app. But the app itself does not result in the rapid, cheap, or convenient circulation of people, objects, and value. That circulation is facilitated by the human labor performed by the driver partners. So when Makarim uses language such as cyborg or operating system of the world, he foregrounds the technological innovation and reinforces this idea of seamless automated process by which the circulation takes place almost magically. Here, the driver partner is positioned in service of the consumer cyborg, intended user of the app and beneficiary of its cashless payment system. So let us examine this cashless payment system. E-money was legally defined in 2009 as a type of digital credit balance issued by a private actor, stored as a data point on a server. And despite this, it's only within the last 5 years or so that it has gained mainstream adoption. In practice, it works as follows. A customer uses state-issued money to purchase digital credits issued by a private actor. This can be done in several ways, but it's commonly done by purchasing the company-issued credits from a driver or another affiliated merchant. And for users who do have bank accounts, it's possible to purchase credits by using a debit card, as seen in this illustration, or by transferring money through an ATM. Customers can then access this money through the app interface in the form of the digital wallet, which you see here as the blue field at the top of the home screen in the app. The digital balance will then appear as a payment option alongside cash when you're placing an order through the app, which is the main way of engaging with the digital money. In this way, the privately issued credit can then be used to make payments to merchants affiliated with the app, such as this motorcycle driver when I book a trip to the university from where I was staying. Similar to a gift card, e-money then is a type of debt that Gojek or OVO issue to you and where they repay you when you use the app to make a payment, effectively by transferring your credit record to the record of the merchant, after which it can be withdrawn again as cash. So this mechanism for transaction means that the language of mutual exchange is a prominent part of discourse surrounding digital payments. In this discourse, digital transactions are often viewed as taking place in a flat, symmetrical, or egalitarian relationship without a central financial intermediary, such as a bank. However, as Sophie was talking about earlier, a digital payment has to happen through something, through hardware, services, networks, app interfaces, agents, and of course, third parties. Obscured in this transaction then is the power that these new platform intermediaries exert in configuring the conditions of the exchange relationships of the transacting parties. It is this expansion from a ride-hailing app into the center of our socioeconomic exchange practices and the subsequent dynamics that these platforms introduce to the circulation of value that deserve this increased scholarly scrutiny, which is why this conference is a really great idea. So examining how consumer cyborgs and driver partners are positioned in this digital payment ecosystem provides a really illustrative example of how participation in a cashless economy is not a universal experience. A technology that makes life more convenient for some can greatly complicate the lives of others. Where cash can be exchanged from one hand to another, digital money requires much more infrastructural support, QR codes, EDC terminals, and much of this infrastructure is often rendered invisible by design, thus allowing users to pay without hassle. The underlying infrastructure is concealed within these frictionless aesthetics, as you can see in this advertisement for GoPay's new Pay Later service. And I would argue that to provide these conveniences to their consumer cyborgs, these platforms displace all of this friction and hassle and the cost of digital transaction onto the driver partner. To illustrate this, let's examine how both customers and drivers are positioned in these critical moments of both topping up and cashing out the digital credits. So these screenshots show a top-up transaction that I had with a Grab driver in 2019. Once my booking is accepted by the driver, the app covers most of the map with an unclosable splash screen with a dominating green button encouraging me to top up my balance with the driver. After clicking the button, the next screen informs me that I can request between 10 to 320,000 rupiah from the driver, and it gives me the option to enter a figure. The app now shows me a comforting image with a sparkling green check mark. My request has been successfully submitted. In the car, the driver reaches for his phone and almost instantly a new splash screen appears on my screen, telling me that the top-up has been successful, and I hand the cash to the driver. However, there are a few things that the customer does not see in this interaction. Firstly, when the app tells me how much money I can request, the number it shows me is the entire contents of the driver's digital cash wallet, 320,000. Secondly, the driver does not, in fact, have the option to decline this transaction. In the driver's version of the app, the splash screen that appears gives him simply the option to click a similar green button, which reads collect money. The button doesn't even say confirm transaction. So once requested by the customer, the transaction is inevitable and there's no meaningful agency for the driver. This resulted in what many drivers refer to as OVO theft, when customers would simply request the entire contents of the driver's wallet and then take it. And such design may not have any malicious intent, but reflects neglect, revealing that the contents of a digital wallet do not truly belong to the driver until they have been withdrawn as cash. These are his earnings, keep in mind. Instead, the wallet is there to enable customers to access and make use of the company-issued digital credit. So cashing out. For drivers selling balance to customers, as in the previous example, represents an important alternative way to cash out of the system, because sometimes accessing an ATM can be quite inconvenient. Instead, by selling their balance, drivers instantly convert digital assets into cash without having to wait for the transfer to be processed by the system, meaning many of them are really proactive in offering top-ups to customers. Operating on the front lines of the digital economy, these drivers are thus doing the persuasive work of bringing new customers into the digital payment ecosystem of these apps on behalf of the companies they work for. Meanwhile, the e-money tokens continue circulating within the system and the company doesn't have to transfer money to the driver's bank account. As top-up agents, drivers are converted into on-the-go digital ATMs for customers, but they also use customers as on-the-go cash ATM services for themselves, because drivers need cash. And therefore, it is they who incur the hassle of ultimately having to rematerialize the digital money into cash. Thus, in this system, drivers are the ones who take on the frictions, risks, and transaction costs of facilitating a hassle-free digital payment ecosystem. For the intermediaries processing digital payments, the value in providing payments infrastructure shifted with digitalization, as Sophie was also talking about, from imposing fees in exchange for the service of moving money to the value of transactional metadata. So when the consumer cyborg purchases things through these apps, they let the app, its owners know where they like to shop, what they like to buy, who they like to buy from, what their transport routes are, and what they're willing to spend. Where cash is anonymous and usable only by whoever's holding it, digital money becomes hyper-personalized, facilitating an unprecedented aggregation of transactional metadata. As the head of the Gojek data engineering team writes on the company blog, the biggest moat Gojek built is payments. Once you're handling money for a user, you can build a castle of services within it. If we examine this a bit more, this moat is comprised of the digital credits issued privately through the GoPay wallet. purchased using Indonesian rupiah, these GoPay credits can be used exclusively for services accessed within the Gojek platform. It is Gojek that controls the metaphorical drawbridge, which both gives access to and confines money, services, and people within the moat's boundaries. By inserting their digital infrastructures atop existing informal transactional practices, these companies reconfigure their users into the algorithmically managed driver partners and consumer cyborgs, thus converting the transacting parties into a site of value extraction. And so just to summarize, as time is running out, these platforms obscure these underlying power asymmetries between the exchanging parties, as well as the power that these companies exert as they define the conditions for exchange within the digital infrastructure. Moreover, the language of automation and operating system of the real world ultimately conceals the fact that this constellation between consumer cyborg and driver partner is a transactional arrangement that is valuable to the corporation. Users of the apps, no matter if they're drivers or customers, are tools for the platforms because their transactions lead to the circulation of both money and data, which is where profits are derived. And thus, for the companies, the emphasis is not on creating equal conditions for exchange, but on securing continued customer engagement. And this is done by providing cheap and convenient services for consumer cyborgs through the platform, which depends upon the exploitation of labor and the displacement of transaction costs of digital payment onto driver partners. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. I think we can go ahead with the presentation from Dr. Tom McDonald and Dr. Rao Yichen. And they're, I think, trying to highlight the question of finance and debt, which would be a great segue.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Jillet. And also to Pierre and Laura. It's been a fantastic 2 days, a really great conference full of ideas. I'll just try and share my screen now as well. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I have to apologize because my slides are nowhere near as beautiful as Sunniva's either, so I cannot compete. So I'll just try and proceed with the competition, with the presentation. But anyway, this presentation is a work in progress as well. And it's a collaboration with my former PhD student, Rao Yichen, who's joined us today. He has now left me and gone to Michigan, where he's doing a postdoc. So hopefully he'll participate in the Q&A as well. Here in this presentation, we might step a little bit back from like digital payment and platform, the platform of money itself, in a way, but actually we'll be looking at some of the after effects and implications of digital finance, and also given the kind of emerging platform society theme of the conference, we will be considering multiple platforms in one way, because here we'll be looking at how kind of online loan platforms and peer-to-peer lending kind of interface with video sharing platforms to kind of structure interactions and exchanges around digital money. So it's a little bit different from the previous presentation. So the title then is Recontextualizing Digital Debts, China's Credit Collection Callers and the Online Anti-Collection Alliance during COVID-19. And really our story starts a couple of years ago in 23rd of January 2020, just a couple of days before the start of the Chinese New Year, when the central government in China imposed a lockdown in Wuhan and the other cities in the Hubei province to try to control that initial COVID-19 outbreak that occurred in the region. So over the days that followed, the remainder of the country kind of followed suit and entered a kind of semi-lockdown with strict social distancing measures that were made possible by an emphasis on collectivist values, which mandated that citizens should exercise compliance and self-restraint for the greater good of the nation. Coincidentally, at the moment when these restrictions were enacted, hundreds of millions of citizens in China had already gone back to their hometowns and villages to spend Chinese New Year with their family. So as travel restrictions within the country came into effect, many people realized that they'd been able to return home to the cities where they worked for an extended period of time. Many workplaces and factories closed temporarily, and in many places they didn't reopen until mid-April, some 2.5 months later. And now, as a result of this, unfortunately, some individuals, and especially those with low incomes who already might have had quite tight finances, ended up missing repayments on online loan products or other credit products such as credit cards. Really, the kind of thing we're interested in looking at in this paper and asking is, how did financial institutions and the third-party credit collectors that operate on their behalf attempt to use mediated means to kind of pursue personal debt repayments during this COVID-19 outbreak, and also how did the debtors respond? And we argue that the COVID-19 crisis really engendered an especially pronounced sense of moral ambiguity around the enacting of these debt relations, where debtors and credit collectors responded, which they responded to by attempting to recontextualize debts, albeit in very, very different ways. So for debtors, they drew on the symbolic power of the state and ideas of public legal commitment as a kind of broader imagination of a more powerful collective responsibility under the pandemic, whereas credit collectors invoked an imaginary of family and private moral commitment to try to cultivate feelings of shame and awkwardness amongst debtors with the aim of kind of extracting repayments. So I just want to begin by kind of very briefly touching on some of the theories and ideas that have influenced us in this work. So this section is called Moral Debts and Moral Collections. David Graeber's described the profound moral confusion that surrounds contemporary financial debts, which have resulted in a transition from an economy of credit rooted in moral obligation to an economy of interest where creditors can specify numerically exactly how much debtors owe. Also, Joe Devil examines the UK credit collection industry, describing how credit collectors engage in a kind of captation, kind of trying to reel in defaulting debtors in order to get them to re-engage with the debts that they've kind of dropped and forsaken. Then finally, Davey also looks at low-income UK debtors here, highlighting how there are unequal struggles of moral value that are present in the debtor and creditor relation. So these ideas are all really useful and influential for us when we think about the present case. We wanted to touch very briefly on the methodology of this paper as well. It really emerged from Yichen and I, our desire to kind of better understand already very significant changes that had been occurring in the field of credit collection in mainland China, and how these maybe were being further shaped and affected by the unfolding of a really unprecedented pandemic that was also making it impossible for us as kind of anthropologists to do traditional fieldwork and ethnography of the kind that we were used to. So the approach that we ultimately developed relied on our explorations of really rich collections of videos about debt collection that had been publicly posted on the Chinese video website Xigua Shipin, which literally means watermelon video. In early 2020. And many of these videos are either vlogs describing how to kind of deal with debt collectors, or they're actually recorded telephone calls between the posters and collection agents. And taken together, these videos point to the existence of a loosely structured online anti-credit collection alliance that kind of produce and comment on each other's videos, motivated by a common desire to share strategies to kind of counter the techniques that are being employed by the credit collection industry to try to recover debts from borrowers who are in arrears. So although this approach meant we couldn't directly speak to the debtors or credit collectors, actually these videos are really, really frank often, and they provide a really interesting insight into the kind of rich experiences around credit and debt during this period. So we'll now move to talk about the kind of findings and data, if you will. This next section is called Business as Unusual, Emerging Moral Ambiguities in Debt Collection. And we start with a quote. At the moment, in the aid of the country, we're all trying to do our best to avoid leaving home in order to stop the spread of the virus. And this above comment was actually made by a debtor, Wonga, in the start of his vlog video, which helped to kind of frame the instructional guidance that he was preparing to give his audience on how you could lodge complaints with the WeBank, an online bank platform, with their customer service agents, in order to get them to cease making kind of credit collection calls. So the same statement also attempted to make a very important moral claim, that if staying at home entailed sacrificing one's earnings and missing loan repayments in order to make a positive contribution to this national effort against the virus, then surely this was quite a laudable course of action. So these reasons actually could powerfully counteract any aspersions that credit collectors might cast on debtors that they might be unwilling to repay, or that they might simply be kind of work shy. Furthermore, it constituted a kind of powerful new line of moral reasoning, which sharply curtailed the kinds of pressure that it was responsible for collectors to apply to debtors. So now we'll move on to the next section, which is called Reaching for Regulations, and kind of examines the role of the state. So during the peak time of the epidemic, the guidelines issued by the state mandated only that for those individuals affected by COVID-19 because of, say, illness, quarantine, undergoing essential support work, or temporary loss of earnings, financial institutions ought to properly direct and flexibly adjust arrangements of home mortgage, credit card, and personal loan repayments, along with rationally postponing those payment deadlines. So the ambiguity of the phrasing in this directive actually provided plenty of scope for differing interpretation at the local level by financial institutions, which you could see in some of these videos. A further note is the fact that this directive didn't actually apply to micro loan agencies that operate online, which instead fall under the supervision of financial officers of local governments. And debtors, on their part, often adopted a strategy of kind of invoking vague government policy in their interactions with credit callers. And as you can see in some of these quotes here from the videos, and even they sometimes went so far as to actually use these calls as an opportunity to start quizzing the callers themselves on whether such policies actually existed, and if so, what the policies actually were. So here it's interesting because the state somehow seems to float above these negotiations between debtor and creditor, and both parties can only kind of invoke it by actually kind of referring to these vaguely worded guidelines. And this situation actually helps to create extra room that allows for this kind of shifting and negotiation of responsibilities. So now we'll move to this next section, which is titled Invoking Friends and Family. So another party frequently entangled in the context of debt relations is actually the family and friends of debtors. And it's often the credit collection agencies who initially invoke the spectre of family and friends during these calls. So the invoking of family speaks to the fact that in the Chinese cultural context, most private debt relations are often drawn within a broader sphere of family responsibilities. If you can't return your debt, it's your family who traditionally would have lived in the same community as you or village as you, who would have been felt responsible to be paying it. However, the forces of rapid urbanization, financialization, and digitalization that have swept across China in recent decades have led people's debt to become increasingly decontextualized from these traditional family moral obligations. So for the majority of small personal credit products like online loans or credit cards or digital banks, family seldom bear any legal responsibility. And in fact, it's precisely this depersonalized quality of many of these novel kinds of digital credit in China that attracts younger people to it, because they're keen to avoid kind of borrowing from friends and family and all the moral obligations that that entails. However, credit collectors are also very aware of this. So when borrowers subsequently become defaulters, credit collection callers often try to invoke the presence of debtors' family and friends within this relationship with the intention of inducing a kind of moral pressure capable of eliciting repayments from debtors. And I have just 1 minute video to show you as an example.
喂，崔先生吗？你在我们平台欠款已经严重逾期了啊！你如果再不还款，我们要采取手段了。
我不是不想还啊，我手里真没有啊。
没有你去借去啊！你在我这哭穷有什么用啊？
问谁借呀？现在谁还能借我呀？
问你亲头借呗。
亲戚朋友，我现在还有什么亲戚朋友啊？你们上次报我通讯录都知道我欠款了，现在还让我去管他们借，谁能借我呀？
我告诉你啊，我不管你这期，你要是今天下午4点之前还不还款，我们就要采取手段了啊！
外币你们收不？要收你们把地址给我，晚上我给你们整过去。
是区的，外币哪儿的？
天地银行的。我是崔教授，关注我，每晚8点直播间为大家讲解负债、逾期、催收相关知识。
So this video actually shows a really common collection strategy, which often relies on the practice of blowing one's contacts, whereby during the credit application process, borrowers often unwittingly grant their lenders the contact details that are stored on their contact list of their smartphones, and actually give permission to credit collector callers to call their friends and family if they kind of miss out on repayments. So therefore, many debtors respond to this by saying, how can I call my friends and families because you've already blown my contact list, and these people are not actually my friends anymore. They won't speak to me anymore. So this kind of speaks to the idea that in order to Graeber's idea that in order to make something saleable in the human economy, one first has to kind of take it out of its context. So to conclude then, in this paper, we try to explore how financial institutions attempt to use mediated means to pursue debt repayments during the COVID-19 outbreak. And we also looked at debtors' responses to this. And what we see is this kind of shifting moral ambiguity around debt and attempts on both parties to try to recontextualize the debts in different ways. For debtors, they try to invoke this kind of collective responsibility where they're, acting on behalf of the nation, to kind of be good citizens and that's stopping them or preventing them from making their repayments. Whereas on the other hand, for credit collectors, they often try to invoke these ideas of family or private moral commitment to try to recontextualize debts in order to try to kind of encourage debtors to make repayments. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Tom. That was an amazing presentation, and I think we can already think of quite a few questions for you in the Q&A. So I'll go ahead and invite Koray Caliskan, who is going to talk about a very important aspect that I think we have been missing out by using the term digital money, which is data monies. So over to you, Koray.
Thank you very much, Jillet. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Jillet and Pierre Giorgio for this wonderful invitation. I greet you from the land of Lenny Lenape, otherwise known as Brooklyn, New York City. It's too early here, and I'm sorry if I'm less articulate than usual. I will talk about a number of things, but Sunniva, Tom, and Jillet raised the bar so high. I don't know whether I'm going to be keeping up with this after these wonderful presentations. And when I'm talking, if sleepy children show up, forgive me because they are sleeping next door, and most probably my daughter is going to come and shout at me. I was like, what are you doing? Like, it's not even day now. All right, so we're going to today, can you see my, okay, great. I'm going to approach platforms from money. I'm going to approach money from its materialities. And then I'm going to approach these materials from practices of accounting. And then I'm going to wrap the whole thing to money. It's going to be a summary fashion. So if you have more detailed questions about how different parts of the story that I'm telling works, we can discuss it in Q&A. And after the presentation, I'm going to send you a number of papers that opens up the different parts of this presentation. So I will try to describe you how a particular exchange platform works in cryptocurrency. And I'm going to draw on my research, which has three components: computational text analysis of all white papers of cryptocurrency blockchains, all terms of service agreements of crypto platforms that dominate around 99% of world trade right now, fieldwork with one of the largest global crypto exchange platforms whose name is Exchange X, Platform X, can't use their name, signed, I don't know, 200 pages of documents. In this transparent machines of trust, they made me sign, I don't know how many documents, and also interviews with exchange actors. Let's take a look at transformation of fiat. It emerged before Christ 550 in Anatolia, today's Anatolia. Lydians used materiality of metal to print the first money. Then Kublai Khan, possibly is stealing the idea from the Chinese, proposed the first paper money in 1260 AD. These two money materials we still use, like a €2 coin is the first Lydian money, and 200 euro, or this one, a 20 pound that says Adam Smith on it, actually, is the second material. The third material is new. It is first data money that came out in 2008. I don't call them digital money. Why? Because the first two can be digitalized. And most of paper money, US dollar or euro, is digital. So calling it digital does not do justice to the historical and material specificity of cryptocurrency that we see now. What's going on in this money things? It's the analog exchange is very similar, and we replicate in digital. There is something called the wallet. You open it, imagine we're buying this iPhone 3. You remember that? I used to have those. They are so beautiful. So you're gonna buy an iPhone. You'd open your wallet, send $100, and then it goes to another wallet. These wallets can be bank accounts too, and then you get your iPhone. In digital exchange, imagine I send you Ethereum or AVAX or something else, Solana. And in order to buy this phone, I send you this money. And then this money turns into this data structure. And then it goes to another wallet. So all these wallets are digital. This is impossible. You can't do that. That's why before 2018, we didn't have cryptocurrency. Why? Because I can take a picture of this $100 and send to Sunniva. And Sunniva can just, CC it in its WhatsApp group to her family and send it to everyone in Copenhagen, New York City, and Paris combined. It's impossible. You can double spend it and you can replicate it very easily. Blockchain solves this problem. It makes fraud impossible by someone called miner, which is actually an accountant. It assigns incentives for accounting. We all open a digital ledger and it's magical. You write one and then the same thing happens everywhere. And then people look at this, and then if this transaction happens, we say, okay. And if 50% of us say, okay, of 10,000 people, 5,000 people says, okay, the blockchain says, oh, thank you for accounting for this transaction. Why don't you give me a gift? This gift is Bitcoin. And it picked up in value afterwards. Then the blockchain supplies bookkeeping. It's an accounting mechanism, actually, and it prevents double spending and ensures irreversibility. It looks something like that. So the first two monies, it's double entry bookkeeping. Accountants take care of it, state controls it, and then we pay money to banks and this and that. With data money, this is how we keep track of those transactions. So the entire blockchain is the tree, Bitcoin is the apple. Blockchain is the book of ledger, the ledger that keeps track of bookkeeping, and crypto is what you get for doing this. And then people begin to value that. So we see four novelties here. It's a new money form. It's not digital money. It's not digital cash. It's not electronic cash. It's not, it is material. Digital is material. And the materiality of this new kind of money is called data money. What is this material we send? When I send this, I send the materiality of paper that represents the value we imagine in this. When I send you crypto money, I can send you right away, I don't know, 1 cent, 2 cents, $2 billion. It's very fast now. We send the right to send data in a public space privately. I repeat, we materialize the right to send data privately in a public space. So this is the new monetized material of data money. And it operates and works in a new infrastructure. It's an actor network platform and on a new process called stack economization. Let's take a look at what are these platforms, exchange platforms are. As of today, we have almost 19,000 data monies. We have almost 60,000 markets, all operating under more than 600 exchange platforms like Coinbase, like Binance. The market cap is $2 trillion, making it among the top 10 economies in the world. It's huge. And only in 24 hours, we have like $117 billion worth of transactions. And Bitcoin is getting less and less important. It's only 40%. It used to be 90% a couple of years ago. How to understand platforms? There are many of them. Interestingly, the literature on platforms emerged in 1990s in industrial organization literature. First, people imagined a commodity as a platform, like a Walkman. Then in 1990s, IBM's new produce planning strategy wanted to platformize. They said, we don't want to compete with other computing companies. We want them to use our platform. This created a great sea change, and then people begin to see it as a cyber mediary. First, this is Koyo and Julien 2001 paper. It didn't pick up. People couldn't say cyber mediary. We have to be very careful in proposing concepts. People should be able to say it. Second, Wright in 2003 said that, oh, this is another market. It's just they dragged a very underdeveloped notion of Adam Smith's understanding of microeconomics to the understanding of platforms. And then Roche and Tirole, who won a lot of awards by arguing that, oh, platforms are two-sided markets, as if there is a one-sided market that economic sociologists they would show. They were wrong empirically, very much like Adam Smith in describing markets. But it picks up because it seems to be working for some. There's a growing literature in management, finance, and economics that looks at the granular detail of platforms. Evans argued that it's a technology. Julien argues that it's a device. Ambrose thinks that it's an effect. Filistrucci argues that it's a facilitator, thus a device. And Konstantinides argues that it's a place. Again, it's like the blind man and the elephant metaphor. We all hold a part of it and then describe it as like, oh, that's a tusk, that's a radar, that's whatever. There's an abundant literature on exchange platforms in trading as a bubble, their prices, their market behavior, but they draw on an assumption that they're just markets, pork belly, Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. We can just study all these prices, which doesn't go anywhere, of course. Why? Because you don't have to study prices to know that they either go up or down. The difference doesn't really matter. So you can actually guess what's going to happen there. Explaining the price movement is not helping us understand markets. And there's one more complication. It's more important. Platforms are not markets. They go beyond marketization relationship. There are 5 new things about them. Their numbers are skyrocketing, making them the fastest growing market type in human history. The top 10 dominated 35% of entire cryptocurrency trading. I need to update this data. This is from mid 2020. I believe this is even more right now. Wash trading is very common. And their geographical distribution, this is accurate, is usually around Singapore, United Kingdom, South Korea, Estonia, Hong Kong. Hong Kong is now losing them, USA and Turkey. It's a multi-purpose exchange platform. There are many markets under one exchange platform. And these markets operate as an exchange, as a company, as an infrastructure, as a mint, as a vault, as an accounting system. There are many things at the same time. 3, their dynamic use of time is very important. They never close. Information is continuous. So this means that when you say only 12 years is half a century, if you compare them to classical stock markets that are open only 37 hours a week. Their space is socio-digitally designed marked by states. So it's not like, oh, there's a revolution. We live in a different world. No, we live in the old world of capitalist economization. States are still very important. You pay taxes and stuff like that. So it's not like a revolution is happening and we need to understand it. It seems like the main structures of economic power are continuing. There's a continuity there, yet with new materialities of money making and platformization. And finally, there's a multitude of platform agents. The X Exchange, if you're curious about how it smells, how people work there, what kind of a place it is, it just smells coffee and carpet. And you think that there are like computers everywhere. There are not computers everywhere. And you would think that people are like, they are nerds and then they do crypto. No, they wear shoes and ties and then they want to buy BMW and whatever. So they are like regular financial companies. They have open offices, but we can talk a little bit more about it, about my field work there. And like exchange, all data money exchange platforms are mints, they print money. They are banks, they lend money. They are vaults, they keep your money. They are exchanges, they facilitate trade. Also markets, data centers, information clearing houses, accounting agencies, and even courts when you have a problem. Coinbase, the largest platform, describes itself as a wallet, an exchange, a set of tools for merchants, all built in the same platform. I have been studying markets for more than 20 years now. I've never seen a market that prints its own money. So we are seeing something really new here. So if cryptocurrency exchanges are simultaneous to these things, how to describe them social scientifically and accurately? Instead of describing with words, why don't we take a picture of it? I tried to work on illustrating with two designers, Stefan Johnsons and Lawrence Tobiaski, to describe how a platform works. This illustration looks at a cryptocurrency platform. You see in blue infrastructure, and you have different functions of this market, like this exchange, like arbitration, banking, software, barter. And then there are stacking of relations there and market pairs that operate like spinning plates. And spinning plate is an important analogy because these relations are very much like computing stacking of data. They stack a variety of relations that have network effects among each other, and owner of the platform controls it. How to describe this? I think a platform is a platform. We don't need a new term for that. However, we need a conceptual tool to approach this big universe. So I believe that actor network inspired economic sociology helps us understand this better than any other approach for a number of reasons. It gives us an opportunity to look for the agency of devices, the places, networks, and infrastructures, a multitude of actors, and more importantly, representations like data, code, programming, and scientific proposition. So drawing on a number of two papers I wrote with Michel Kellon 10 years ago on economization and marketization, and also drawing on Michel's previous work and also Don Mackenzie's previous work, I approach this relationship not as a market, device, place, or whatever, but a process of economization. And stack is the stacking of data layers vertically, like plates in a kitchen. It arranges multiple layers of representations in relation to each other, and in economization relation, it stacks those relations in relation to each other, of course, according to the particular economic interest of the platform owners. In this way, one layer supplies an ancillary ground for another to stand on, while at the same time building a coherent framework of entire operation. Two more slides. So why is it an economization relationship? Because actors say so. I don't believe that people do not understand what they do and we tell them how they live. I think they understand very well. And when we look at their lives, we see them that they call that relationship as economic. They use modeling in pricing and market making, and they create a series of economization processes from markets to valuation, minting to assetization in various layers of this platform. So stack economization then can understand us how in platforms, socio-digital spaces, designing of instruments, and imagining of new digital materialities make possible stack economization. Money sits at the center of this, and the materiality of money we use there is data money. And I believe that this is a sector agnostic tool to approach platforms and their monies. Thank you very much for your patience and listening to me.
Thank you, Koray. That was a really wonderful presentation. I see that we already have a bunch of questions, so we'll start with Sunniva. Go ahead, Sunniva.
I was just clapping.
Well, applause as well. But if there are any questions or comments, we can take them now. This is meant to be a freewheeling discussion, so.
Let me send you a few papers about it. Would you like to see? Can I send it over chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So what I didn't talk is communities in the world that makes this possible. So I'm gonna send two papers. One is about a failure. Everyone talks about discuss, so we see how things fail. And then the other is about a photograph of a global community. One surprising result is that they don't invest all their money in crypto. They are very conservative. They are mostly male, they're mostly white, and they're mostly Western. It's not like globalizing, transparency, and this and that. It's just same old West with a lot of money doing things among each other. There is taxation and regulation components, and I'm sending a piece on taxation and regulation. This is a great paper. You have a sleeping problem. You take this paper, it puts you to sleep in 7 minutes. I checked it with other people. It's like tax, a lot of regulation and codes, and the other two papers.
Koray, in fact, very recently in India, cryptocurrency has come under the purview of taxation. So this is right up our alley. While you're sharing those papers, I think we can start with questions. We have Abhiram, who's a PhD student at IIT Kanpur, and he, in fact, has been following some of the cryptocurrency communities here in India. So I'll let him ask the question. Go ahead, Abhiram.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful talks, especially Dr. Caliskan. It's wonderful to hear words from you. So, sir, I'm working on the social interactions, relations, and networks among the cryptocurrency blockchain platforms. So, I have a couple of questions. One is regarding the role of social ties in the motivation of participation in cryptocurrency platforms, and the other is regarding the influence of intrinsic qualities of cryptocurrencies on people. So, sorry, I have read your paper, and you mentioned that the motivation of participation or working in crypto communities are to gain knowledge and the hope of people to make money and the enjoyment that they attain through the participation. So during my fieldwork, I've observed that cryptocurrency is marketed through social relations. The social pressure from close ties and the curiosity regarding cryptocurrencies created by their close social relationships and the explained the speculated imagined futures filled with luxury consumption drive people into joining these platforms. And furthermore, it is also a strategic search for livelihood in the unemployment cases that drive people to participate in the cryptocurrency. So I would like to know about your thoughts on this, and then after that I'll ask my second question.
Thank you very much, Abraham. These are great questions. Firstly, what you very nicely summarized, it's better than I do. I don't sometimes remember those things. In that paper that came out, I think it was in Economy, it was British Journal of Sociology, is the result of a survey for one global cryptocurrency community called Electra. So I don't know others, we don't know these people, but this was the first global survey of any global community in cryptocurrencies. And it was surprising for me to realize that they love doing these economic things. It's like, there's one banker who works on finance, hates what he does, and then he's like, I don't do anything. I just, push. It's like Tom was referring to David Graeber, my old friend, who we unfortunately lost in Italy last year. He calls this bullshit jobs. I really love him, conceptualizing shit in social sciences. I think there is a lot of shit we're looking at. And these people do not believe that it's a bullshit job. They spend their Sundays instead of their families on money. What is going on here? That's what I try to understand. About doing things with social ties, look, we are humans. We do everything by organizations. So by definition, everything is social. This is where we start from, right? We explain the nature of these ties, not showing whether they are social or not. Bologna did it, 1944, it's over. Things are social, everything is embedded. Yes, let's move on.
No.
So,
Perché carico solo.
yeah.
Perché
So,
devi scaricare anch'io da qua.
Pierre Giorgio, you're saying something?
No. Sorry, I forgot my mic open. I was trying to
It's
download
okay.
the paper you posted.
Yeah.
What about
Abraham, you wanted to ask another question. However, there are 3 other papers in the same panel. So perhaps I step back and then open discussion to these 3 wonderful papers and helping Jillet also have a diversity of discussion of all papers. Would that be okay? And if you reach out to me, I can address the second one.
Thank you, Koray. We'll move on to Rajoshi's question. Rajoshi, go ahead. Rajoshi is also a PhD student at IIT Kanpur.
So first of all, I apologize for the build environment I am in. There might be some kind of background noise. Secondly, first of all, the continuous conversation from the morning, I'll be confessing that it has my neurons flaring, and I have a lot of questions, but I'll limit myself to 2 of them. So my first question is to Sunniva. Sunniva, I have been working on ride-hailing apps and food delivery apps for around 3 years, and my fieldwork is qualitative in nature. And exactly as you said, these the platform partners themselves act as these kind of mobile exchanges of cash as well as digital money. But what I found very interesting is that in my case, the respondents themselves have their individual accounts on a different app. For example, if they're working with Uber, they're not only transacting with their customer on an Uber wallet, but they also have something called a GPay that is based out of Google. And what this says is that if I put my entire money in this form of GPay, in Uber, what happens is that Uber takes 7 days to repay in the case of India. So I want to reduce that kind of risk that is there. So I was just wondering, did you find within your respondents people using multiple forms of this kind of digital payment platforms? And my second question is to Tom and Rinche, and the question is that we have been reading a lot from China, anthropological work from China, that there is this notion of guanxi that exists there, the form of social network and peer pressure. Did you find such forms of social pressure that was being exerted? And do you see this kind of YouTube broadcasting or whatever digital broadcasting as a form of public shame to get that kind of a money back? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's really interesting to hear that you're finding similar things. So in my fieldwork, it's also, I did this in 18 and 19. So things have also probably changed since I finished my fieldwork, especially because of COVID and increasing digitalization. But at the time, there weren't really many different types of payment apps in Indonesia. When I started, people were barely even using GoPay. It's exploded since, but for most drivers, that meant that it's not so much that they were using, I mean, Uber doesn't even exist in Indonesia. They sold all of their practice in Southeast Asia to Grab. So there aren't really that many competitors, or there weren't at the time. But this aspect of managing where your money is a hugely important part of the work of being a driver. So what they would do is, and it's also really important here to understand that being a driver is not a sort of singular category, right? There are multiple experiences of being a driver. So you have some who are driving part-time, they might be a student, but relatively well off. And for them, it's a subsidizing income. For others, it's a full-time job, and they might be accessing this account through a relative. And so they're driving kind of illegally and are at fear of being suspended. And if that happens, they also lose access to their digital wallet and all of their savings, which many people had experienced. And it was a really stressful thing. So for those people, constantly getting the money out of the system is a really important part of the job. And so people have different ways of handling that. At the time also, it's like you cannot actually transfer between people with these apps. They're kind of locked in. So once they're in the platform, they can only be used to pay for things. They can only be used as payment. So that's one of the reasons why the main way of moving money has to do with getting customers to buy your credit so you can get the money out as cash in that way. You would find though that, so for example, at some point Grab opened up the opportunity for drivers. So drivers have like 3 digital wallets. They have what's called a credit wallet, which is money that they might owe the company. So the company extracts a 20% cut of all of the income that's being earned if it's a cash-based payment that the customer makes. If it's digital, there's no extraction. The 20% cut is instead a discount that the consumer is offered. So the company is financially incentivizing users to make digital transactions in this way. But so if drivers receive payment and therefore get the full money, they owe customers 20%, or they owe the company 20%, and they have to make sure to keep this credit wallet loaded so that the money can be extracted. And if they get below a certain fraction, they are locked out of their account until they can top it up themselves, for example, by going to an ATM or something like that. So there's a very complex sort of system that these things work with. And they have a cash wallet, which is called cash wallet, but which is really just where their income goes. And then some of them now, I think all of them also have access to the commercial wallet. So they can move their earnings directly into the commercial version of the wallet. And so other drivers, for example, for weird reasons, some drivers are not able to sell their credits. And so what they do is instead, for example, I had one interaction where one of them was like, don't worry, I would love to sell you this money because I would like you to give me a good rating. And so he would sell me money, as in I would give him cash and he would then move money into his commercial wallet. And then I would simply get, because he was a premium user of the commercial wallet, because otherwise you cannot transfer money, would transfer me wallet to things. There's like these tons of workarounds for how these systems work that are very much have to do with the kind of complex inequalities that are built into the infrastructure for how these as wallets set up. So I scratched the surface of it in this presentation, and I think I may have rambled my way to an answer, I hope. Yeah.
But that's a really great answer, Sunniva. I thought also, the aspect of ratings, I'm glad that it came into the discussion, because how it gets tied into, I mean, one thing is how the app may be constraining the drivers, but then there is also this other constraint that comes from the consumers in terms of ratings as well, to use this kind of e-money.
Absolutely. And I do think there's just, I'm going to tie another point to it, which is just that I think because there's such differentiated experiences, right? For some drivers, it's very intuitive and easy to switch between these different kinds of accounts, the commercial wallet, the non-commercial wallet, navigating using a relative's app. But for others, they come from less tech savvy backgrounds. And so they might be borrowing or have purchased someone else's account. And because, so for them, for example, in many cases, the main relationship to this money is about extraction. So it's about getting it to an ATM as quickly as possible. And even many of them don't have bank accounts originally, but because though consumers can access these wallets without having a bank account, that's the whole cashless argument, right? This is easier. Drivers have to have a bank account. It's obligatory. And so they are, if they don't have one, they're given one when they sign up through a collaboration that these platforms have with banks. But for most drivers, of course, this is like a really basic premise thing. They get an ATM card. And so I found that many drivers kept referring to their ATM, not their bank. So like, for example, they would say, oh, I would only go to the bank if I dropped or lost my ATM. And I was like, what do you mean you lost your ATM? And they were talking about the ATM card, because the only thing they use it for is to go and then, get the cash withdrawal. So just this sense of what being tech savvy is not a universal thing across all of these different drivers. And their capacity for maneuvering money is very much also related to what sort of network they're a part of. Yeah, okay. I'll let the next question happen.
Should we move on to the next question that Rajesh asked for Tom and Yichen?
Sure, thank you, Rajoshi. The great questions. So I'll try and address really briefly the point about this kind of guanxi and social relations in money. So yeah, I mean, I think, guanxi was incredibly important in the early reform era of China, like the 90s, when things were really opening up, the early 2000s. And back then, if you were trying to get a loan, it would be from a state bank or something like this, right? And there'd be a big bureaucratic procedure, and most normal citizens would struggle to get one, right? So you certainly had to know people. And equally, if you were trying to go for informal finance at that stage, if you couldn't get money from the state bank, then you might hit up, the boss of the local business or something for an informal loan, right? I think online loans and peer-to-peer lending, which Yichen's PhD is all about, is the big move kind of away from this, where actually a lot of people are increasingly seeking these other avenues to get credit. Some of them formal, some of them still a bit informal, but it's precisely because they don't want to ask their friends or their family, precisely because it's awkward that they're going to these avenues. So in this paper, I think what's curious is that, when those loans are not repaid, then suddenly the lenders are kind of, going after those very networks of friends and family to try to exert pressure to kind of get the money back, right? So you see how we haven't entirely forsaken this kind of intimate network of relations, which I think is really interesting. Maybe Yichen could take up the point on what was it, on
shame.
Shame, yeah, on shame.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, which reminds me of some videos that I know that people make on a TikTok in China. It's about like they would actually like show their process of debt collection like to people. In a sense, it's not, maybe it's not for shaming purpose only. It's more about like sharing of their works and it's more interesting in that normally people who try to shame people through videos are not those private debt collectors, because that would be maybe charged as violating people's privacy and stuff. But it's interesting that I saw there's some videos for shaming purposes done by the court. It's actually that there's a China's social credit system that records people's default behaviors if they were sued to the court because of that relationship, and then the court order asks them to repay the money, and then if they don't repay, they will be put on a blacklist in the sense of the social credit system. So these people will be banned from a lot of services, if, for example, like onboarding a flight or something like that. And one of those kind of so the court order procedure is to kind of publicize these people's information online, and some courts that I know are using those videos to publicize people's information as a kind of public shaming purpose, because there are not many other ways to actually force people to return their money.
If I may just add, actually, Tom, when and Yichen, when you were talking about the debt collection during COVID-19, in fact, it reminded me of how much we need comparative studies, because particularly during COVID-19, there was Chinese lending apps became the subject of great attention in India, because we saw very similar strategies of debt collection in India as well. It made all the papers. So it would just be just how some of these strategies transcend between India and China.
I could see, because the capital moves, I guess. When China is kind of trying to ban those online apps, they might move to South Asia, even Southeast Asia. So I guess there's those strategies as knowledge, they also travel.
So the blowing up of the contact list was, we had already heard quite a bit of it in India. Go ahead, Yichen, you had something to add.
Yeah, I have actually a comments for Jillet and Koray's presentation, because we were talking about platforms in this conference, and I was just thinking about how differently the platforms could be assembled in a sense, in different ways, and how people are involved. Because I think what Koray's talk indicates that cryptocurrency platforms could be assembled through like interesting ways of turning data money. And while I think Jillet were talking about how people, like ordinary people, could actually assemble themselves in a sense to establish some kind of money work platforms. What I observed when I was back in Europe, and I was walking on the street of Barcelona months ago, and I was just surprised that there's like a little store that provides services for local people to purchase cryptocurrencies. So it's like the guy who is helping elderlies purchase bitcoins through I don't know, like their own kind of ATMs or some like a local agency apps or something like that. So this is a real person, like a young person, helping the local people purchase cryptocurrencies with cash. So I was thinking about when I would encounter that, which is so different from what I use those cryptocurrency exchange platforms like Binance and and stuff. So it's just this how interesting the people are bridging each other and those platformizations.
Thanks, Yichen. Go ahead, Koray. You can go ahead and then I'll respond.
Thank you, Jillet. Yichen, this is great insight, actually. In my research too, I saw this, but there was also another thing that I saw. A lot of people think that cryptocurrency expansion is creating an alternative money and finance form. It doesn't. It's actually helping dollarization of international trade, not the other way around. People are using more cryptocurrency they use more dollar to exchange more cryptocurrency. Plus all these exchanges keep cryptocurrency as a collateral, as in their own accounts. So they are not written on blockchain itself. So they are replacing blockchains as a system of accounting. So a lot of people think that without cryptocurrency, there is no blockchain. No, it's banks, it's new markets, and then it's money markets. But one thing that you said is very important, this pop finance movement, that people are becoming parts of marketization relationships with an unprecedented speed in world history. It took American population to learn to buy one stock, 50% of American population to buy one stock, 200 years. Now, cryptocurrency boom is expanding and 10-year-old kids have money and they're buying and selling and they're trading. So we are going to be understanding an interesting universe of economization in the future. It's too soon to call that a revolution happened, but we are seeing a sea change. And there's nothing new, of course, in terms of the variety of monies. Viviana Zedazar showed us, many studies of money showed us that it is social, it's multivariate. There are not three kinds of money. Anything can be monetized, right? From cigarettes to this, from data to that. However, in terms of fiat, we have a new money materiality. And because of this material, things change. If you want to carry $1 billion of paper money, you need a truck. If you want to carry $1 billion of quarters, you need 50 trucks. And I can send you 1 billion on AVAX, Avalanche blockchain in less than 10 seconds for $17. So material services matter there. It's not digitalization. It has been with us since late 1960s. Actually, it was Stalin's idea to imagine a digital money with credit cards. He said, we have to find a way to do that in Soviet Union to be able to control where people spend their money. And then they said, oh, computers are too small. Yoldash, Chief Stalin, we can't do it yet, they said. And he died before having the credit card. And then Americans invented it later.
in fact, some of these arrangements are fascinating to study because I think something that Abhiram was not able to get to in his series of questions was that he has been exploring these arrangements in India whereby people are using, there are these multi-level marketing arrangements in India through which people are being encouraged to enter into the world of cryptocurrency. And it really is fascinating how much of it, what is the scope of the population that is being incorporated into crypto. So really, who is going to be your average cryptocurrency person will be quite interesting to track. But I wanted to go ahead, Koray. I'll ask my question.
No, there's a data point that people follow in adoption of cryptocurrency in the world. It very much mimics adoption of internet in the world and its history. So it seems like we're in the middle of it. And then for the next 3 to 5 years, there will be more and more people buying. In order to enter, you buy, so it's bullish. So prices are going to go up. And then they are going to be like financial markets, not a huge swing, but like a long-term trend. We'll see.
I have a set of questions for you, Koray, but maybe because Pierre has been very patient, we can go back and take his question. Pierre, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jillet. Well, I have a question is mostly for Sunniva and Koray, but I think it's more an open question. I do premise that, digital money in general is not my research topic, but I'm interested in it since I'm a sociologist of consumption. And as far as I get, all the system, all the idea of digital money is grounded on trackability of exchanges, segmentation of consumer and so on and so forth, but appears to be an uneven system because if I lost my crypto ledger or if I lost the access to the exchange platform or whatever, then I'm done. So this is kind of crazy on a system that is grounded on control. That's the first part of my question. Secondly, for Koray, I would just like to ask, as far as I know, one of the main problems of crypto in general is eco-sustainability. It appears that the critics states that, okay, what you said about digitalization is impressive, but on the other hand, it's very energy consuming, producing or mining those kind of money. Am I right? Okay, that's it.
Jillet, we are waiting. I think Sunniva is gonna.
Okay, we can take all the questions together. Sunniva, go ahead.
Well, yeah, my question was mainly, it's just an interesting thing because we were talking about the materiality of data money. And specifically when you're pointing out how many trucks you would need, I wonder how much you also consider then the physical materiality of cryptocurrency money. It has a huge square meter footprint as well, right? Not to mention environmental footprint. So, you've just kind of displaced the physical load of it into certain other locations. Yeah, and I also think it's an interesting, so yeah, I guess I'm just interested in what your comments would be on that aspect of the materiality of digital money or data money. And there's also something slightly provocative, I think, in this distinction of cryptocurrency money as being data money versus digital money, as you described as being bank money. Because when I think of digital money, part of what I think has been important to understand for me is that the distinction between bank money and, well, digital money versus cash money is that digital money is just bank money. It's just numbers being moved around in spreadsheets, right? So that is also just a data point that someone has in a private server somewhere. So there's just a lot of trust involved. There's trust involved in all of this in different ways, but I just think that it's a slightly provocative distinction you're making there, that cryptocurrency is data money versus the other forms of digital money being, bank money. Yeah.
And if I could just add to the aspect of materiality that Sunniva had highlighted for Koray, I think you had to sort of walk over very quickly on the regulatory aspect of it. I mean, because you pointed out, these are in place. Place has been used also as a metaphor to talk about cryptocurrency. Maybe if you could shed a little bit of light on the regulatory aspects of this, which vary place by place.
Okay. May I address? All right. If you lose your wallet, you're done. Yeah, and not. If you're trading in a cryptocurrency exchange, you don't need a wallet. It is just a bank account. You lose it, you call them, they give you your, and then they report you in America and in European context, they report you taxes. And in terms of taxes, it's short-term capital gain. If you sell it before 366 days in the US, it's long-term capital after. If you make $200,000, you pay almost 35, 39% of the money back to the state. If you make less than 10,000, you don't pay much. The energy consumption, cryptocurrencies as data monies are of 3 types in terms of their blockchain. If I may use locomotives, a Bitcoin is a coal-operated locomotive of late 19th century. It burns a lot of coal, it's not efficient, it's slow, it's gonna disappear. There's no way that we can continue it. And it's going less and less. I never touched Bitcoin, for instance. Second is Ethereum, it's diesel engine. All right, it's more efficient, but it still burns a lot. And third would be Avalanche, which is electric operated bullet train whose energy comes from wind or solar or this and that. So Bitcoin burns a lot of energy, but even for the energy it burns, it's more efficient than almost all industries, steel, tourism, and whatever, computational other industries. So Bitcoin is like $1 trillion, and then look at any economy that creates $1 trillion growth worth of economization and its energy costs. So energy thing, it's very small when it comes to cryptocurrencies, and it's becoming, you can mine AVAX with very small computers. Physicality, I don't know what physical is. Physique is, the corporal thing is changing right now. If I may give you an example, I'm gonna show you, Sunniva, 2 hands. How many hands I have? Look, 3, right? So in the platform of Zoom, I'm using my corporal has 3 hands right now. They are both hands. The extension between the body and the thing is getting larger and larger and larger. So physical doesn't really help me understand things. However, material things in terms of intangible and tangible works. This mouse is a tangible material thing. It hurts me. That hand is intangible. Do I show it in the right place on your screen? Or is it here? Here? There? Yeah, so in my screen, it's here. In yours, it's there. So it's even changing. So this physicality is changing. So I try not to use digital, physical. I use material or intangible or intangible. Immaterial things like, I don't know what, we can't talk about them. They are metaphysical, they are different things. I don't know how to relate to them. They are derivative realities like class, all right? About the difference between data money and digital money, okay? Your US dollar can be digitally represented. Data money is not digitally represented, it's made digitally. US money or euro is digitally represented but made by the central bank. That's it. Either as debt or as fiat or by printing. The difference is very clear. There's no way that we can confuse them. Data money is made by data. Dollar is not made by data. It used data representations to exchange it, but books are kept in a technology that was invented first by monks in Italy, a double entry bookkeeping to take care of churches' incomes, right? In most around Bologna. So it is still the same technology, digitally represented, of the money materials that were first proposed by Lydians and then by Kublai Khan. Data money is different, historically specific, materially unique, but it doesn't show us a revolution. There's no like, oh, the world is very different right now, kind of TED Talkish excitement here. There is a continuity of bank power, market power that goes all the way to cryptocurrencies. We're gonna learn. Look, I mean, what happens is right now we can't tax cryptocurrencies because we tax them with paper money and its digital representations. This is like times of Kublai Khan, and we say, I don't care your paper money. I want my gold coins. This is how I'm gonna tax you. It's like people just exchange everything on money, so you don't tax this economization relationship. Right now, because we don't tax on crypto, we're like, oh, we don't know what it is. It's property for IRS. It's security for Securities Exchange Commission. It is something else for, so we don't really understand it. It's gonna take like 20 years until we realize that we are witnessing a new money form. And economists are going to be the last to realize that, as usual. But because they're aligned with people of power, they don't really care to really understand things. What they care is build forms of performativity that makes money power status for them.
I wonder how, when the states are going to realize it, because I was struck by a segment in your presentation where you talked about, well, Bitcoin and blockchain. I mean, crypto and blockchain are not the same thing. And this was really the language that was used by the central bank in India, who said, look, we are very wary of cryptocurrency, but blockchain is the technology that we want to stick with. Which is why I thought, just to think about some of these regulatory efforts around the world, I think it might be interesting to track that through.
Yeah, exactly. And India is a great place to understand money. Modi wanted to change money material, and the entire system was going to collapse because in their mind, it's like, we'll just replace old with new. Get out of here. Data materialities have like direct politics, and it was going to disenfranchise the poor, which is the majority of all non-West in the world, right? So they resisted, and it was a great example. Now, central banks are trying to understand whether they should have a decentral bank mind, but it's very, very difficult. When I talk to central bankers, I explain them the kinds of the taxonomy of blockchains that it's in the Economy and Society paper that I sent you. If you want to have something like Bitcoin, decentral and open and public, you have to become decentral bank. Do you really want that? I don't think you really want that. In democratic contexts, I believe we still need the political power of the citizen to be able to affect finance. But in undemocratic contexts like China, Turkey, Hungary, or whatever, India, I hope it remains democratic. But looking at what Modi is doing, it's very, very difficult. And it's very important for citizens to be able to have a decentralized ledger system like a blockchain to tokenize economic relations. In the future, we're going to be making more and more monies that has specific social and political objectives.
I'd just like to take a minute and thank Sophie so much for that wonderful keynote talk which set us off. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, Sophie.
You're very welcome, and thank you. And I'm sorry I have to leave now. I have to boogie on to the next meeting. But I look forward to continuing our conversation and discussions, hopefully somewhere, sometime, perhaps even only in this, dare I say, digital space right here somewhere. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We will. Bye-bye.
I just wanted to check if there are other questions or comments. Kalpesh Kumar Chauhan, he's a student at IIT Kanpur. Go ahead, Kalpesh, you can ask your question.
Hello.
You're audible.
Yeah. So I have a question for Tom. My question is like when he was discussing about the online debt collection and how they were trying to use different variety of techniques and use moral commitments to collect the debt. But I was wondering if if the credit scoring technology was not enough to discipline the borrowers. For instance, in case of rural India, I understood like from the women borrowers that when they failed to borrow, like when they failed to repay the loans that they had taken for the microfinance, after the lockdown, like after 2 months or so, when the loan collection officer came, they asked for the loan repayment, and then women were denying that, okay, because for 2 months they were not able to earn enough, and then they are not able to repay. Then they said that even if you don't repay, then I think you will not be able to access the more loans in future from any financial institutions. So I wonder how this credit scoring technology worked in the context of China, and was that not enough, or how the utilization of moral values helped? Like, what was the need of that?
Thanks, Kalpesh. It's a great question, and it's good because it gives me a chance to fit in the stuff that you can't fit in a 15-minute presentation that's kind of in the paper anyway. So yeah, I mean, I think you know, even though now you know, there is this kind of super advanced credit scoring system in China, and you know, very importantly, different platforms are developing their own credit scoring thing. So you have like Ant Credit Pay has its own credit scoring thing that's maybe different from the social credit. On the flip side, so these become very good at like assessing people's lendability. But on the flip side, once people fall into arrears, it tends to be a bit more of a kind of labor-intensive process, let's say, a human-intensive process, right? So part of it is automated. So alongside these calls that the video profiles a lot, actually there are a lot of automated messages that deluge people's phones, telling them they have to repay and things like that. But a lot of it is still people calling up. Because China has civilized its industry now, there are very few in-person collections anymore. People do not turn up at your house threatening you or doing anything like this. Instead, it's all very kind of mediated, quite literally, you know, and platformatized. It's on your phone, either through messages or calls. Now, of course, your rating will reduce if you can't pay, and that will affect your eligibility to get further loans. However, kind of the great point is still, and Yichen alluded to this before, is still, as far as I'm aware, there's no personal bankruptcy law in China, right? So remarkably, you know, what happens is kind of more administrative. So, you know, you start getting, alongside all this stuff, threatening letters, you know, letters from agencies that may even say that, you know, they'll report you to a court. But even the worst thing that will happen is you'll get put on a blacklist, you know, and that might affect your ability to travel on high-speed rail or do things like this or take a flight in China. So, you know, I mean, there are kind of measures. But I think one thing that's interesting is, and you know, there are what you might call disciplining mechanisms. But yeah, they take a really different form to the ones we're aware of. And I think what's special about this particular group of borrowers who make these videos, who are not representative of all borrowers in China, not at all. You know, they're quite a specific group. you know, they're the kind of people who realize that, well, no matter how many threats I get, it's not going to be that bad. So they feel like, well, I may as well share this kind of knowledge with everybody else. So, you know, I think that's one of the kind of, you know, interesting things is this group are quite blasé about it. And they feel that like, you know, the worst they can do is threaten me and maybe put me on some list or something like that. But I'm fine with that. You know, so it's an interesting group, definitely, and not representative at all.
But also, Tom, I think, you know, dealing with maybe like, especially in a country like India, dealing with financial institutions, formal financial institutions, I think there's always been a sort of collective generation of understanding and knowledge, right? So it's this shared knowledge. It's such a powerful body that people have devised techniques to, and collectively devised techniques to deal with them. So I think I see also this Chinese case as an instance of that, you know. So it's not simply that what can they do, but try to get people together as well, how to negotiate this.
Yeah, this is the knowledge behind your money work, right? So this is you know, I think that's why as well. I mean, I think all of the talks today have really you know, highlighted how you need to look at the work that's going on around this thing. You can't just look at the thing itself, if it's even a thing anymore, or if it ever was.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, Yichen, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, just reminds me of there are some borrowers who would say that they would rather like pay back the bank's loans or credit card loans first than paying back the platforms, because they understand that the banks are a kind of more formal system, and then their behaviors will be more formally recorded, and that would affect something else that in the future of their, you know, they're made aware of that. So I think there's also kind of difference between different types of institutional arrangements behind those platforms that we're talking about.
And people are drawing on those memories of dealing with these various institutions. That's pretty, I mean, how strategic they are, right? Yeah. All right, I think we've had a really amazing discussion today. Thank you so much for making time for this across time zones. I'm sure it must have not been easy. I'll quickly hand over the stage to Pierre to just check about the program for tomorrow. Pierre, maybe you can fill us in on the plan for tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jillet. Tomorrow we have day 3 of the conference, and we're going to start 9 a.m. CET time with augmented and reduced reality of consumption world, keynote by Cornelia Ann. Then we will have the presentation of the monographic issue of Ocular Journal about gender and generation. And then we will have a roundtable around 11:30 as today, always CET time. Every one of you is more than welcome to join us for the session, of course, and for sure we will keep having our debate live during the other session online and even on our website and in each and every form that hybrid reality would make it possible. Okay, really appreciate everyone's contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One of you.
Thank you. So we hope to keep some of these conversations going tomorrow and also later on. Thank you again, and we hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye.